Good afternoon. Welcome to Ziggy's World. I'm Ziggy, and today I'm going to be talking with Councillor Thomas Kerr, and we're going to discuss the general election and Thomas's campaign. So, welcome, Thomas. How are you?
I'm very good. Thank you very much for having me on.
Great. First of all, before we get into the general election, I'd like to quickly discuss this vote the Glasgow Council had on sending money to the Middle East. What is all that about?
So it's not a vote as such. It's not came to council yet. There was a question that was raised at one of the full council meetings, which is why the press have picked up on it. And there's supposed to be a paper coming to City Administration Committee, which is like the council's governing body, that will decide on whether or not they're going to send aid to Gaza. My opinion's very clear on it, and you know, I've had myself been targeted with abuse because of the stance I've took on this. But Glasgow City Council, whether you agree or disagree with what's going on in Israel and the horrible situation that the people of Palestine are facing, whether you agree or disagree with that, Glasgow City Council should have absolutely no say in what's going on in terms of foreign politics. And you know, if Rishi Sunak can't get through to Benjamin Netanyahu and Hamas, then there is no way that Susan Aitken and Glasgow City Council is going to be able to do it. And instead, the streets are filthy, potholes are, you know, they're a regular sight in Glasgow. The place
Sure, really.
We don't have the money, but we're sacking 172 teachers this summer because of council cuts, and we're now talking about wasting aid and wasting money to go to Gaza. So I think it's the wrong priorities. When it comes to City Administration Committee, myself and John Daly will vote against it. We'll have an amendment put forward on that, but I just think it's a waste of money, but it's also a waste of our time. That's the main time. The main thing here is we've debated Gaza and Palestine twice now. In this council. So that's 45 minutes that takes up of council officers' time to have a debate in the city chambers for people to grandstand on a national issue. We don't talk about the issues that matter to people outside in the real world, and that's the big problem with this building. It is so detached from reality. It's actually quite scary, and trying to get councillors to understand that decisions they're making in here, low emission zones, you know, parking charges increase, all this stuff is having a real terms impact on the city and how the city's looking, but we're wasting time talking about international politics. It's crazy.
Yeah, for me, when I first read this and I first heard about this, my feeling was, well, it's out of the remit of the Scottish government and the Scottish Parliament. So why is a local council doing this? Because it is foreign aid that is the remit of the UK Parliament.
Yeah, no, exactly. And if you look at the funding that the UK government's given in terms to Palestine and Gaza, because as I said, look, my heart breaks for the people that are in Palestine at the moment. Whether you support Israel, support Gaza, whatever side of the conflict you're on, my heart breaks for the people of Israel and it breaks for the people of Gaza and Palestine. But the UK government has given millions in aid to Gaza. That's their role and that's their responsibility to do it. It's not the council's role, but it goes to a bigger issue that's facing this council. And I'm going to say something very controversial. I 50% agree with what Nicola Sturgeon said last week about this general state of politics. I disagree with her that there's too many young people in politics, but there's too many career politicians that are in politics, and that's the problem. They don't live in the real world. And in this building, we have councillors who have spent their whole careers working in parliamentary offices, who have only stood for election and who have been elected at a very young age and who now only want to talk about national issues because they want to see the council as a stepping stone to get somewhere further up. If that's where your politics is, that's fine. It's all well and good to have a couple of people who want to go into politics and career progression that way, that's fine. But this council is 85 councillors, and I can tell you at least half of them are already eyeing up where the next ambition and where they can go next. That's the problem with this building. And they end up becoming detached from their realities and detached from the local communities. And that's how we spend time talking about Palestine or independence or Brexit, rather than talking about the bread and butter issues that are affecting the people of Glasgow.
Yeah, absolutely spot on with that, Thomas. So we'll now, I want to discuss, obviously, we're now in general election mode. We've got 5-6 weeks of campaigning. You are standing as a candidate. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so I'm standing in Glasgow East, which is my home patch. So this will be the third time I think I've stood for Glasgow East. I'm losing track with all these snap elections that keep taking place. But no, so I'm standing in Glasgow East. I was asked by the party if I would consider doing it. And it was a very quick answer from me because I'm a natural campaigner. I love being on the roads, but the people in Glasgow East, it's my home. It's where I grew up. It's where I represent at the moment. It's where I went to school. I care passionately about it. So whenever I'm asked, given the honour of sticking my name in the ballot paper, I will always do it. So I'm looking forward to the campaign.
So have you been out and about knocking on doors?
Yeah, so I've been out the past couple of weeks, and sorry, I can hear another noise, Mark. I don't know if you can.
Yeah, I heard something, but I don't know where that's from.
No, so I've been out and about speaking to people. Obviously, the way that the Conservatives will run this campaign is we have target seats where we hope that we can try and win. Glasgow East, I don't mind saying, I don't think it's an exclusive for you that I'm not expecting to be the next Member of Parliament for Glasgow East. So we've been out the doors speaking to people. I've been doing that a lot anyway in Shettleston. I do that quite a lot regularly. That's part of the reason why I'm a two-term councillor. But I've been out in other areas across the country as well. And there's a real big, anger out there with the SNP. People are scunnered with them. They want to give them a punishment. This is going to be a very different election from what's going on down south. The SNP's fought their whole lives to get independence. Well, they've now got an independent campaign because up here they're going to get hammered compared to what's going to happen down south. And I'm really looking forward to seeing them, get a proper bloody nose at this election.
Yeah, it's basically it's like I keep getting an echo now. It's like there's two elections, isn't there, going on? There's one in Scotland and one in the rest of the UK, and they're very different objectives and the very different campaigns, basically.
I was speaking to one of the Labour candidates about this last week, and I was saying there's a real anger out there with the general public just about politics. There's a state of politics where people just feel fed up with politicians. That's going to impact the Conservatives without a doubt down in England. But I think it will have a massive impact on the SNP up here. People keep talking about 14 years of Tory rule. Well, it's been 17 years of nationalist rule in Scotland, and I think people are really, really getting sick, fed up with them. I think they're fed up with the way that they change the leader. They're sick, fed up with the way that they don't challenge themselves. They've got no ambition for the country anymore. It's just rehashing of old policies. And in those 17 years, I struggled to point to what a defining message is from that time in office. The only time that they seem to have had any success of running the country was from 2007 to 2011, which is when they had the Conservatives holding them accountable and pushing forward policies. Other than that, I struggle to point to anything that is actually benefiting the people of Shettleston properly. It's all gimmicks and one-liners, and actually it's having a more negative impact for people locally.
What are you seeing from Labour?
Well, I think there's two sorts of Labour in Glasgow. You have candidates who've been selected in seats. So every Glasgow seat, I'm going to tell you right now, I will make a prediction that every single Glasgow seat will go Labour in 5 weeks' time. I don't doubt that anymore at all, which is good because we get rid of the SNP, and I'm more than happy to get rid of the SNP. But there's two very different kinds of Labour. So this is part of the reason why I'm standing in Glasgow East. We have some very good candidates from Labour who are standing, who will be fantastic MPs. You have some not so good candidates who don't really know their areas and who have fallen into the usual Labour arrogance of we're going to win anyway, so it doesn't really matter who we have. And in Glasgow East, that's definitely the case. The candidate who they've stood is a guy called John Grady. Very nice man, absolutely. But he has no connection to the East End of Glasgow whatsoever. He doesn't know the East End of Glasgow. He's not from the East End of Glasgow. And he has no connections at all. So my whole message in this campaign to people is that Labour's going to win, but let's make sure that we hold them accountable. Let's make sure there's a foreign on their side, because I'm more than happy for Labour to win here in Glasgow. I'm more than happy for them to take power here in the City Chambers, anything to get rid of Susan Aitken. But we need strong Conservative candidates and Conservative councillors to hold them accountable, because otherwise what we're replacing the SNP with is just SNP light, only we don't talk about the Constitution. And I think Scotland needs fundamental reform, and I don't think we're going to get that with the Labour Party.
Do you think, because you just touched on something there, do you think candidates should have a connection to the constituency that they're actually running for? Because we see this quite often, don't we, where people come from the outside and they have no connection whatsoever. Yeah. You've just mentioned.
No, you do. I think there's definitely, whether or not you stay in the actual, ward boundary of the constituency or whatever else, but you should have some sort of connection with the local community in which you're standing for, because politics at its very core is about people. We are here. I've got the honour of sitting in this building as an elected representative because the people of Shettleston put me here, and I take that very, very seriously. I'm not here as Thomas Kerr, the Conservatives. I'm here as Thomas Kerr, the councillor for Shettleston. So you need that connection locally to keep you grounded and be able to fight for what you think is right. And I get that a lot because, as I said, I stay in the East End of Glasgow. I spend all of my time out and about in cafes and shops and supermarkets, all that sort of stuff in my ward. I'm consistently stopped by people who want to talk to me about whatever's going on nationally or locally. That then puts into my brain what the general public are talking about, and then I can come into this building very fiercely and say, well, this is what the general public are telling me. This is what the public are telling us. It's not politicians. It's not spin. This is what I'm getting on the doors for the people. And I think you need that proper local connection. I'm not convinced right now that we do have that, and that goes across all parties now. Of course, I would say this, the Scottish Conservatives have been quite good at getting candidates, particularly who are embedded in the local community. So if you look at the key target seats around Scotland that we are standing in, every candidate who's standing is based in that constituency, knows that constituency, cares about that constituency, and will campaign for that constituency. That is a fundamental thing of what politics should be. I am very concerned, though, that what we're about to do is replace the SNP with SNP Light with Scottish Labour. And until they get their act together, I'm not willing to let them just walk in and take these seats, because I got involved in politics because for 40 years Labour let down the people of Glasgow, and I wanted to give them a good shake-up. That's why I joined the Conservatives as an East End Tory. I don't just want to replace the SNP who have let us down with the Labour Party that's going to fall into the same trap as what they've done before. I'm hopeful they won't, and with people like me being a thorn on our side, they definitely won't. But I'm just concerned that is going to be the case.
There's two things I want to ask you. Is one, I keep hearing, and I'd like your view on this. I keep hearing that the Scottish Conservatives are actually going to, according to the polls, going to gain a couple of seats in this election. And two, the SNP strategy of only talking about and campaigning against the Tory seats and wanting to get rid of the Tory seats and really not even concentrating on Labour. Have they given up?
I feel as if
some Tory seats.
I feel as if what's happened with the SNP campaign is that they've given up in the Central Belt. They have no coherent message against the Labour Party in the Central Belt. They've got no vision as to what they want to do with the country, and they've got no record, more importantly, to stand on. So they can't offer the people of Glasgow, they can't vote SNP for change in Glasgow when they've ran the City Council for 7 years. They've ran this country for 17 years, and people in Glasgow feel like the city is worse off than it ever was. So they can't come up with a coherent argument. They are now at proper desperation mode, and you can see that by the fact that they ousted Humza, replaced him with Swinney. All this stuff, it is proper desperation, and their whole campaign message is vote for us to beat the Tories. When your whole campaign message is simply vote for us to get rid of somebody, then you know that you've already lost. So they're already, I suspect, giving up on the Central Belt. They're hoping to try and take the 6 Conservative seats that exist in Scotland, and so when you can say that's some sort of victory. It's not going to happen. I am very confident that the Conservatives will hold on to the 6 seats that we have. We have fantastic MPs in all of those constituencies, and in Dumfries, where the sitting MP Alistair Jack is stepping down, we've got a new candidate in John Cooper who's even more brilliant. He'll be fantastic for that community. He's bedded in that area. He knows that area. We've got Harriet Cross up in Gordon who's going to be the exact same. So I am very confident we'll hold the 6 that we've got. And in those other key seats across Scotland, I absolutely agree that I think there's going to be some Conservative gains. I've been down campaigning in Aircarrick and Cumnock with Martin Dowie. Brilliant guy, absolutely embedded in his constituency. He's the council leader for South Ayrshire Council, and when you look at what they've done since they took control of the council again in 2022 from the Labour SNP administration, it's been transformative for the people of Ayr, so I'm very confident he'll get in. We've got another local councillor, Amanda Hempsey, standing in Argyll and Bute. I'm desperate to get her in, mainly because that big swathe of blue will just really annoy the SNP on the map if we get Argyll and Bute. So what I'm trying to get at is there is key seats around Scotland where I've been campaigning. There's other ones up in the northeast where it's a bit further for me to try and get to, but I'm thinking the Angus and Perthshire Glens with Stephen Kerr. There's the new Murray seat where Kathleen Robertson's fighting. So there are key seats across Scotland where we are in contention, and it will be about trying to mobilise the pro-UK vote and getting them to turn out, because that's what the crunch point here is going to be. Are you sick fed up with the SNP enough to tactically vote? And in these constituencies, you must get out to make sure that the Scottish Conservatives get that vote.
Do you think, because you just touched on it there, do you think tactical voting is going to be huge in this election?
I think so, and I think it has been. So if you look at the Rutherglen by-election, where I was the Conservative candidate, a lot of the SNP like to point to the fact I lost my deposit. I was delighted to lose my deposit, to be honest with you, Mark, because it meant that we managed to beat the SNP, and Michael Shanks got a fantastic victory. So I don't care about losing my deposit if it means that we're getting pro-UK MPs elected who are going to do their job. Actually, in that campaign, I'm very proud of the campaign I ran. And we pulled Labour to the more sensible side. Michael Shanks launched his campaign, a lot of people forget this, saying that he was going to stand against Keir Starmer on self-ID, and he backed Nicola Sturgeon's gender reform bill. It was because I came out so viciously against it. Scottish Labour changed their mind on that bill. So we're pulling them to the more sensible side of politics. So I'm very proud of that campaign, but I think we'll definitely see that in this general election. Right across Scotland, there will be where Labour in more contention, pro-UK voters will vote for Labour. Where there's Lib Dems, they'll vote for the Lib Dems, and where there's Conservatives, they'll vote Conservative. I think that this is going to be a very, very much a beat the SNP sort of campaign.
Another thing, I feel across the whole of the UK, there's a bit of an apathy about politicians and about the general election and about voting, and a lot of people have said that they're going to spoil the vote, their vote, and or they're just not going to vote. But here in Scotland, I feel there's a bit of an energy and a bit of a buzz that it's the first time in a long time that we're not just dreaming of getting rid of the SNP. We are realistically going to get rid of the SNP as the major party in Scotland at Westminster.
Yeah.
You feel that kind of buzz when you're talking to people?
Absolutely. I was out in Helensburgh on Friday speaking to voters with Amanda Hempsey and Argyll Mute, and we were obviously door knocking, speaking to voters as we went to the doors. The response was brilliant. I think I spoke to 2 people who were against. Interestingly enough, they don't tell you who they're voting for now. They just say they're not voting Conservative. It's always SNP voters, but the fact that they're not open about it being SNP voters says a lot about where they're sitting. But when we were out in the streets, people were coming over and talking to me. They'd recognise me from the Rutherglen by-election, or they'd follow me on social media and talking away and things like that. So there is a real element and a real energised voter base here in Scotland because, as you say, for the first time in a long time, every single vote actually matters. And whatever constituency you're in Scotland, you can vote to either send a message to the SNP and get rid of them, but also in areas like Glasgow East, where I'm going to be the candidate Labour are going to win, you can also send a message by saying, we're happy that you're beating the SNP, but we want you to be a lot more sensible in going forward, because the main point getting to here, Mark, is the general election is the first point. This is the starting gun of what has to be a longer campaign. 2026, we need to get them out of Holyrood and we need to get them out of government. 2027, we need to remove them from councils up and down Scotland. This is a very, it's a short campaign. It'll massively dent the SNP if they lose all these seats, but we can't take our eye off the ball. The ball they have to be removed from Holyrood completely, because the damage that they've done to this country by running the Scottish government is utterly disgraceful. Taking out 10, 15, 20, 30 SNP MPs will be a great badge of honour, but every single pro-UK voter has to remember, as soon as July the 4th is over with, July the 5th, we need to be back out in the doors, convincing people that the Holyrood elections are in the corner and to remove them from Bute House.
Yeah, because that is the end game, isn't it? It's
the SNP. They are down, but they are not out. This is a political party that's more built around a cult than it is around anything else. They are fundamentally, they support independence and they will vote for independence no matter what. And you see that with them. How else could a party have somebody like Nicola Sturgeon and John Mason in the same party? You will fundamentally disagree with every single issue or policy possible, but they're in the same party just for that one goal of independence. So we can never take our eye off the ball, and they are down. And I suspect after July the 4th, they'll be even further down. But what we can't do is take our eye off the ball and think that 2026 is just coming. No, we need to fight hard to make sure they're removed from Bute House.
Yeah, because what I suspect is going to happen over the next 5 weeks or so is that we're going to see a ever increasing nasty campaign by the SNP. I think it's going to get really down, really nasty, because, as you say, they are desperate.
Well, we've already seen it. We went from having John Swinney shaking hands with Douglas Ross in Holyrood saying, let's all build consensus, to him standing in the streets of Perth yesterday saying, vote SNP to get rid of the Tories. The nastiness and the change of attitude has already happened. I don't understand how John Swinney can expect Conservatives or Lib Dems or Labour to ever work with the Scottish Government with the SNP in charge when that's the message and the rhetoric that they spout on social media and out in the streets. So they're going to get more desperate. They have been put right in a corner here, and they're going to get worse and worse. But that's fine. Absolutely bring it on. I'm more than happy for them to get as nasty and as vicious as they want with me, as long as pro-UK voters stay energised and mobilised and ready for it. And as I said, this campaign will, I suspect, be the easier part of the campaign. The longer campaign has to be to remove them from the Scottish Government and to make sure that there's a sensible alternative Scottish Government ready that's a pro-UK government. No matter who it is, whether it's an Ass or Douglas Ross, whoever it is as First Minister, there has to be a way of making sure that we don't just replace the SNP with an SNP light, because when you look at issues like gender reform, DRS, highly protected marine areas, all this sort of stuff, Offensive Behaviour Football Act, and a lot of policies the Labour Party has supported them on. So it's all well and good getting the independence question put to bed, but let's make sure we don't then elect an extreme left-wing woke Labour Party in the place in the Scottish Government, because if we do that, 5 years later, they'll be removed and the SNP will be back. So we need to make sure that it's a sensible Scottish government with pro-UK voters that does what the country needs, which is a pro-business, pro-economy, pro-job sort of message, and starts investing in our communities. So that's my whole goal is, and we as a pro-UK base can never, take it for granted the SNP are out, because they're just down at the moment.
Yeah, that's a really good point, because we don't want to just replace the SNP for one cycle.
Yeah.
We want to replace the SNP and show that.
And I think that's the coronation plan's already there for the SNP. Get Swinney as the man at the moment who's going to lose them the general election, lose them the Scottish election, and replace them with Kate Forbes. And I think the view is that, well, in 5 years' time, after Kate Forbes is SNP leader, she'll be in a better place to replace an ass. I think that's what the mechanisms inside the SNP are thinking. The thing that worries me is there's so many in the pro-UK side who compliment Kate Forbes. Kate Forbes is still a nationalist. Yeah. Kate Forbes still believes in independence. Kate Forbes was the finance secretary who cut our council budgets to bugger. I remember saying when she stood for the leadership last year, her religious views don't mind me at all, but what does mind me is that she shafted the Forge Market traders in my constituency. Working class people lost out in grants because of Kate Forbes. So we cannot take our eye off the ball when it comes to them. And as you say, replacing them in 2026 is good. Let's make sure that they stay out of power though. And we're only going to do that by having a sensible Scottish government, because if we become this left-wing, woke, replace the SNP, but basically still the SNP sort of Scottish government, the people of Scotland will fundamentally just get fed up with them as well. And then we end up in this cycle again.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. I do think that this general election is vitally important to the longer campaign of getting rid of him in Scotland, in Holyrood, because if we dramatically reduce the number of MPs, that dramatically reduces the amount of money that the SNP receive. And we all know that they are financially either bankrupt or pretty close to being bankrupt. And they have the general election campaign to go. And then they have the Holyrood election not long after it, another year or so after it, which they're going to have to spend money on. So if we can get rid of, they'll lose, what is it, around about 1.2 million money, or depending on how many MPs they've got, and they lose the money that they get, the MPs pay into party, which I believe it's around about £400,000 a year. So they lose that as well. So that has a knock-on effect. How they can campaign and what they can do in 2026, doesn't it?
Yeah, no, absolutely it does. And replacing them is for the third parties, up to also the Lib Dems nationally. I hope that Ed Davey does manage to do it, to be quite honest with you. And I'm saying that as a Conservative, and if Ed Davey does, it will be to the detriment of my own party down south. But I think it's vitally important that the SNP are put back to the fringe side of Parliament in the UK. Because if you see that with Plaid Cymru, and you see that with some of the nationalist MPs from Northern Ireland who don't even take their seats, they are seen as this sort of, joke party who stand up now and again to make a point at PMQs, but they don't really have any vital say in what's going on. By making the SNP the third party in the UK Parliament, they don't have any influence, by the way, none whatsoever. There's been nothing that's changed from them being in third place, other than the fact that they get a seat in question time and they get to, spout their rhetoric louder because the press feels as if they have to give them a fair hearing. So I think it's vitally important that we remove as many of them as possible for this UK Parliament election to make sure that does happen. I am confident that will be the case, though. I don't see anything changing in the next 5 weeks amongst the SNP base to get them the 40-odd seats that they need to keep that position. I think that we're looking at whether or not they go down as far as 15 into the single digits.
Well, I predicted on the majority show that at Christmas we all did a prediction of what we thought would happen, and I've predicted that they'll lose between 30 and 35 seats, and I do think they are on course to even closer to that 35 than the 30 in what I'm seeing in the polls and what I'm hearing as well. So
I'm a natural sceptic. So when the polls started showing this huge surge in the Labour Party's voting across Central Belt and the Tories picking up some seats outside and things, I was always sceptical because I just thought the SNP won't fall as far as that. So I was, up until a couple of months ago, I kept telling people in here there'll be 3 Labour MPs, there'll be 3 SNP MPs in Glasgow. I am now absolutely convinced that they will lose every seat in Glasgow. I don't think there's a doubt about that. And I think that they've got a very serious chance of losing loads of seats across the central belt. So I think your prediction is definitely one that's accurate now.
Yeah. Let's hope it happens. And I'm just going to say now, good luck with your campaign. I hope it goes really well. I'll be following it, and I hope to speak to you again at some time. But I do realise you're going to be
It's going to be a busy 5 weeks. But I'm happy to come back on and have a post-election chat about what's happened. But no, I think we're in a strong place. All that I would say to anybody who's watching this is make sure you vote. Don't get complacent. Don't think it's just going to happen overnight. Make sure you get out on July the 4th and vote. And whatever party it is, just make sure it's not the SNP. And let's get rid of them.
Yeah. I think tactical voting is essential. Look at your area and see who's best placed to beat the SNP. I think that is pretty vital. So I'll again say good luck.
Thank you.
It goes really well. I'll be following as usual. I think you talk a lot of sense. I think you're a great candidate in my view. If you're in Glasgow, please speak to Thomas, have a discussion with him, and vote for him. Let's get rid of the SNP. So
thank you,
Thomas, for coming today. I know it's been great to see you. And well, that's it for today. I hope you've enjoyed the interview. Please leave your comments. Tell us if you're from Thomas's area. Come in and leave your comments on what you want Thomas to talk about, and leave your views. Thomas will read them. I'll be reading them. I'm sure Thomas will read them as well. And if you've got any questions for Thomas, leave your questions. I can pass them on, or Thomas can answer. So please leave your comments, share, and subscribe if you can, and lots of likes, because the likes really matter. It gives the show a good reach. So if you can do that as well. So thank you for joining us, and I'll see you soon. Thank you. Thanks, Thomas.
You're very welcome.